If you'd like to get serious about woodworking, then you need a router table. Today on DIY Man, I'll show you how to build this one right here. You don't need any special tools to make it, and it's not that difficult to build. I'm building this table today for my new router from Bosch. I do think that it will fit most routers though. I just love new toys, don't you? Let's get started by cutting up some 10 gauge flat plate steel. We just need to cut one square that's 12.5 inches wide. I'm not using any special tools to cut this thing out today. I'm just using a 4.5 inch angle grinder with a metal cutting blade on it. If you don't have one of these, you can also use a jigsaw with a metal cutting blade on it. They don't work quite as well as the angle grinder and they tend to heat up a little bit, but it will do the job. Alright, so now I'm going to remove the skid plate from my router. I'm just doing this so I can trace out all the mounting holes. Then I'll do my best to center that thing right on the middle of this plate. Alright, as you can tell, I'm using oil and a small drill bit to drill out all these holes. And my mounting screws have a beveled head on them, so I'm going to go ahead and countersink these as well. Alright, let's go ahead and double check and make sure that we countersunk these enough. That way the screw heads don't stick up too much when we use our table. I'll go ahead and push this little guy in the hole and make sure he doesn't stick up too much. That looks pretty flush to me. What do you guys think? For the middle, where the router bit sets, I'll use some oil and a 2-inch hole saw. Well, that was pretty brutal. Hopefully you have a sharp bit to do yours. My router has a little adjustment screw here, so I'll drill a hole for that guy too. Before I paint this thing, I'll go ahead and clean it up a little bit with a wire wheel. Well, I guess I should go ahead and wipe all that oil off too and make sure it fits first. Looks like all my screws are going in there just fine. They seem to all be pretty flush as well. I should be able to get my Allen stock in there to adjust this thing too. Now for a spot of paint. This isn't anything special, this is just what I had lying around. And in case you're wondering, I did wait for it to dry before I flipped it over here. I'm pretty dumb, but I'm not that dumb. For the top of my router table, I'm going to use a piece of 15 1/4 inch laminate shelving. This has a nice smooth top on it and it's cheap to get from Lowe's or Home Depot. I'm going to cut one piece to 22.5 inches long and then I'm going to trim a 1/4 inch off of this laminated side. Alright, so now I'll set this plate on our shelving. Then I'm just going to make sure it's centered on here. This might take just a minute, but you want to make sure it's right. Come back just a little bit. That looks pretty good. Okay, so now we'll just trace this out. You need a pin that works, obviously. This one doesn't work. Okay, let me try something else. Use this pencil. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to draw lines 3/8 of an inch on the inside of those marks. You'll see why we're doing this here in just a second. If I can remember which one 3/8 is. Knowing is half the battle. Perfect. Now I'll just draw lines. All right, so now what we have is a smaller square inside of this bigger one. And what we're going to do is we're going to cut out this inside square for now. Don't cut the outside one. You'll see where that's going to come into play here in just a second. Alright, now I'm installing this 3/8 inch rabbiting bit into my router. We're going to be making a cut on the inside edge of our tabletop. This is going to create a lip so our plate can rest on top of it. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm super stoked about using this today. This is the first time I've used this new router, so I'm pretty excited to be using it. Everyone loves new tools. Next, I'll adjust my router bit so the metal plate will sit the same depth as the tabletop. Right there. I don't feel like wasting a bunch of time, so I'm going to go ahead and test this out on a scrap piece first. Now we'll test it out, make sure it's flush. I think it looks pretty good. It could possibly go down a smidge, but I think I'm going to try this out and see how that goes. Now we'll just make sure this thing fits. If it doesn't fit, you can trim it off just a little bit more, but it should be snug. You want it to be snug so it just doesn't rattle around in there. Yeah, it looks good. For the trim and the hardware for my router table, I'll use this 4-foot oak step that I got at Lowe's. Now, you can do this with the 3-foot step, but those dingleberries, they ran out of the 3-foot step, so I'm gonna have to make this work. Now, these are actually way cheaper than buying 3/4 inch slabs. That's why I did that. Plus, you get an extra 1/4 inch of thickness. To trim out the tabletop, I'll cut a couple pieces that are 3/4 of an inch wide. Alright, so I cut 2 of these pieces to 15 inches long and then 2 to 24 inches long. And these are going to be my edging for my router table. Now I could attach these using
wood glue and finishing nails, but I want these things to be ultra strong, so I'm going to use some wood screws to attach these. Ah, that's hot. I'm just pre-drilling these right now so I don't split out my oak. Now I'm going to countersink these screws. Now I have a countersink, I have no idea where it is, so if you don't have one, you can use a large drill bit instead. Just make sure it's not a pilot point. This works just as good. So these are 1.5 inch long screws with a beveled head.
To keep the edges from chipping, I put a little bit of wood glue in the cracks and crevices. Let's put a little bit on the inside edge here as well. I'm hoping this will make the particle board a little bit more durable.
Next we're going to be making the legs for a router table. I took 2 2x4s and cut them down to 35 inches long. Then I ripped them in half with the table saw.
Once that's complete, we'll use 2x4s to cut out bracing for the front and back. These will be cut to 22.5 inches long, then they'll also be ripped in half.
Now I'm going to make a few marks on these legs and on these front and back boards. I'm wanting to join these using lap joints today, so I'll make these marks and then we'll cut those out here in just a second using the miter saw. This middle joint, just somewhere down here, close to the middle. I think I'll go 16 inches down. I'll be doing lap joints on these side pieces as well, so we'll go ahead and mark those up.
In order to cut these lap joints, I'll attach a 2x4 to the front side of my miter saw fence. Let's see if I can set up this miter saw correctly. I've never really done lap joints before. I'll set it to where it cuts 3/4 of an inch deep. These joints are just a little bit loose. I might try to tighten up the next ones. If you don't want to do lap joints to build this table, you absolutely don't have to. There are a million different ways you could build the frame for this thing. Alright, now that the hard part's done, let's go ahead and start the assembly. Let's cut one more 2x4 to 11.5 inches long, then rip it in half. We'll use these on the left and right sides as bracing. Yeah, I think I went just a little bit deep on these lap joints. If you have any tips on tight-fitting lap joints, throw those in the comments below. I'd like to see them. Here I'm attaching the tabletop to the frame. Here I'm cutting out a piece of 1/2-inch plywood for the bottom shelf. I'm not planning on storing anything heavy on this thing, so I'll just attach it using wood glue and pocket screws. Here I'm covering the laminate on my router table using masking tape. I'm hoping this will allow me to sand down the wooden sides without scuffing the top. This stuff does not want to come off the roll today. Now I'll take my wooden step back out and cut a strip that's 3 inches wide. I'll cut one piece 30 inches long, then 2 that are 9 inches long. And I've got plenty of oak left over, so I'll cut one that's 30 inches long, then rip it down to 4 inches wide. On both of the 30-inch boards, I'll take a paint can and trace a half circle right in the center. These 2 pieces are going to make the fence on my router table, and these semicircles are going to make the throat where the router bit will sit. To attach these 2 pieces, I'll use the same bevel-headed screws I've been using. Next, we'll attach those 9-inch boards that we cut out earlier. We want the back edge to be 3 inches from the back of our fence. Take your time here and make sure this guy is as square as possible. And I'll do this side the same way.
Now for the latching mechanism on the bottom, I found these horizontal toggle clamps at Harbor Freight for like $5. These should work right here. I'll go ahead and install these right in the middle of these bottom boards.
I attached this guy to the wall to give it just a little bit more stability. Now it's about time to test this thing out. I think the way this fence latches in place is going to work out pretty well. All right, now for the moment of truth. Let's test this puppy out. You guys as nervous as I am? Hopefully I don't have to rickroll you again. Let's try out this panel bit. I bought it at a garage sale for $5. These things scare me. They're so big and they move so fast. Take a look at that right there. Is that not awesome? I am getting snaggled a little bit right here when I move my pieces across here. I think I'm going to have to do just a little bit more sanding right there. But I think overall today's project was a huge success. I've really been wanting to build one of these for quite a while now, and I'm super stoked to see what kind of projects I'm going to be building in the future with this thing. If you enjoyed this build, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing, because only cool people like hitting that I believe button.